Hi, guys. So Trump finally fires his lapdog Pam Bondi, but I'm sorry to tell you, this isn't the win that you think it is. Now, at first I thought, oh, good, right? No one deserves it more. Just desserts, poetic justice, yada, yada. I mean, it made sense because Trump's a textbook narcissist. And this is just what narcissists do. They suck you dry, they make you do all the dirty work for them, and then they trash you when they're done. So yeah, it looked like some sort of twisted accountability. But then I remembered something and I realized that this isn't accountability at all. It's choreography. Because the same system that put her into power is the one catching her on her way down. If you want these insights early, not after everyone else catches up, subscribe and set your notifications to all. Now, to recap Bondi's career path, she goes from lobbying to attorney general, which is wild, and then right back to the private sector. So that's not a pivot. That's not a loss. That's a revolving door. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So no, I'm sorry to say, this isn't a win. I don't believe she begged Trump not to fire her. I believe that that's just the narrative that this administration is leaking to cover what this really is. A strategy intended to accomplish 3 very specific goals. And while we're celebrating the fact that she's gone, Trump's advancing his own agenda, one that makes it less likely that we'll ever see the guilty brought to justice. Let's get into it. Now, obviously, in a sane world, Bondi would have gotten canned for a lack of professionalism and dereliction of duty. She built anticipation around the Epstein Files, hinted that more was coming, more transparency, more answers, and then nothing. No major revelations, no accountability, just a slow, awkward walk back, driving public frustration through the roof. But according to some outlets, that's not even what got her fired. Because allegedly, insiders say that Trump fired her for not going after his perceived enemies that were also named in the Epstein Files. So the story is that it wasn't enough that she didn't go after him, and it wasn't enough that she didn't go after anyone. Because following this logic, if she had, then the accused would have squealed like the pigs that they are, and eventually someone would have traded dirt on Trump for a lesser sentence, or even for a walk. And then she would have had to act on it. And we're led to assume that since she worked for Trump and not the American people like she was supposed to, she probably figured he'd appreciate her for not opening that can of worms. And then we're led to believe that Bondi probably thought that she was special and that Trump would never throw her under the bus, even though he had already done that to Kristi Noem. Somehow it made sense. Now, after getting fired, Bondi posted this tweet. She writes, "Over the next month, I will be working tirelessly to transition the office of Attorney General to the amazing Todd Blanche before moving to an important private sector role that I am thrilled about and where I will continue fighting for President Trump and this administration." Now, this is a very interesting choice of words because basically she's admitting that as Attorney General, instead of fighting for the American people, which is what her job actually is or was, she was fighting for Trump and his administration. It's an admission that she was never on board with us because of the word continue. Continue fighting for President Trump. So that's what she's been doing all along. And now we all know this, but this is confirmation. She's literally saying it. So moving on. Leading President Trump's historic and highly successful efforts to make America safer and more secure has been the honor of a lifetime and easily the most consequential first year of the Department of Justice in American history. You're not kidding, sister, but not for the reasons that you're about to state. Since February 2025, we have secured the lowest murder rate in 125 years, secured first ever terrorism convictions against members of Antifa, shattered domestic and transnational gangs across the country, taken custody of more than 90 key cartel figures, and won 24 favorable rulings at the Supreme Court. Now, I want to address this because there's a book called Freakonomics, and if you haven't read it, absolutely do. So the consensus usually is like, oh, if there are low murder rates today, it's because of whoever's in charge today. But more likely than not, the factors that affected the murder rate started 10 to 15 years ago. because things take time, right? And sometimes that time blinds us to the true origins of anything, whether it's good or bad, a war or a lower murder rate. In this case specifically, I believe that to be the case. And I think that if we look back on policies that were created 10 to 15 years ago, we might see the reason why there's a lower murder rate. Or maybe Trump did it magically during his second tenure. Maybe that's true, although I highly doubt it. The convictions against members of Antifa, I have a problem with. I don't like Antifa, but going after the foot soldiers instead of the people who are actually funding Antifa, that's kind of empty. If you really want to get to the bottom of things and end it, you would go to the source. Why are you going after the people on the street that are getting paid to do all these like riots and everything else? Where are the convictions for the money people, the people that are funding it, right? That's my question. But even if all these things are true, and we should be able to celebrate this and say, wow, that's wonderful. No matter what, the fact that this administration has done nothing, absolutely nothing, to investigate the allegations in the Epstein Files and to bring anyone to justice will always overshadow any of this. Whatever good it has done or could have done is overshadowed by the fact that promises were made and not fulfilled. And when it came to the Epstein Files specifically, that so many allegations against people in there that are still alive aren't being investigated, aren't being prosecuted, it just shouts so much, not just cover up, but a complete disdain for the American people. We've been asking for accountability on the Epstein Files forever. They promised it. They made a law. Then they broke that law and fulfilled no promises. So what are we talking about? I remain eternally grateful for the trust that President Trump placed in me to make America safe again. Now, again, at first I thought, come on, lady, no one's buying that. You're toxic now. You tanked your credibility kissing Trump's ass. And yeah, he might have promised you some sweet private gig, but he doesn't keep his promises, dum-dum. Expecting him to is what got you into this mess to begin with. But as soon as I had tweeted that, as soon as I responded, I felt like, wait a minute, something's definitely off. Something is not vibing. It was just too easy, too pat, too obviously being spun as a fall from grace. And that's when I remembered Bondi's long history with Trump. In 2013, Pam Bondi was the Attorney General of Florida. Her office was weighing whether or not to participate in litigation against Trump University for fraud and deception, when suddenly a Trump charity sent a $25,000 check to a political committee supporting Bondi. How neat. AP reported that Bondi personally solicited the donation. But both Bondi and Trump, of course, denied that the conversation had anything to do with Trump University at all. It was just a coincidence. Sure. After that, Bondi went on to become a very close ally to Trump. So close that she served on his impeachment defense team. But more importantly, Bondi was also a partner at Ballard Partners, where she earned over $1 million a year lobbying for private prisons, Big Pharma, and Qatar. Led by Brian Ballard, a top fundraiser and a very close ally of Donald Trump, Ballard Partners became the top lobbying firm in the U.S., with deep ties to both Washington and Trump. In fact, Trump's current chief of staff, Susie Wiles, also worked there. Do you see it yet? Its influence spans around the globe. So to be clear, Ballard Partners isn't just a lobbying outfit. It's a literal pipeline between government power and private money. If this is all clicking for you, don't forget to like, share, and hit hype to push this vid further. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. When she was appointed as Attorney General, this conflict of interest was so risky that her ethics agreement required her to resign from Ballard and recuse herself from all matters involving former clients, including Trump. But keep this in mind. Bondi wasn't on the outside looking in. She had direct visibility into how the Epstein Files were handled at the highest levels of the DOJ, which makes it impossible for me to imagine that she'd just be cut loose and turned into an adversary. I mean, that would be dangerous. But moving her to the private sector keeps her safely tucked inside the ecosystem. And that matters. As long as she's aligned and compensated, she'll stay quiet because there's no incentive for her to turn against a system that she's still benefiting from. See how that works? I want you guys to realize that Trump accomplished 2 agendas by firing Pam Bondi. 1, he appeased a powerful ally / potential adversary by putting her in a lucrative private sector position. And 2, he diffused public outrage. Bondi's firing signals the message of, okay guys, we heard you. Public outrage gets redirected, and the system appears to correct itself. This is classic pressure release politics. And in my opinion, that's what the she begged for her job narrative is all about. It's supposed to make us feel like there's been some sort of accountability, when in reality, he's just rewarding her and accomplishing a 3rd agenda, which is what I think he wants most of all, shutting down the Epstein Files investigations for good. Because here's where it gets almost too obvious. Her replacement, Todd Blanche, Trump's former personal defense attorney. So Bondi served on Trump's impeachment defense team in 2020, and Blanche served on his criminal defense from 2023 to 2024. Different phases of Trump's legal battle, but the same inner circle pipeline. And miraculously, they both end up in the DOJ. Another coincidence. Now, for context, most attorney generals come from inside the system, spending years to decades building experience before gradually moving up internally to leadership roles before they're even considered for the position. They don't just step in straight from defending the president in criminal court. And Blanche wasn't just a lawyer for Trump years ago. He was actively defending him in high-stakes criminal cases immediately before entering the DOJ leadership. Most AGs are politically aligned with the president, but Blanche is aligned both personally and legally. Considering that the DOJ is supposed to prosecute and investigate matters tied to the president, having the president's personal defense attorney run the DOJ poses a real conflict of interest. It may not be illegal, but it's definitely a red flag. And Blanche isn't walking into the Epstein situation blind. He was already involved in the DOJ's handling of the files, already a part of the decision-making, already on record defending what was and wasn't to be released. So when he steps in now and says, essentially, this shouldn't be part of anything going forward, that's not a fresh evaluation. That's a continuation of a position that he already took. Reversing course now would mean admitting that the process was incomplete, potentially exposing legal or political risk. So staying consistent protects him. But here's where everybody's getting it wrong. They think, oh, he's shutting it down. Well, not exactly, because legally, he doesn't need to shut it down. As acting attorney general, he controls priorities, what gets resources, and what gets attention, and what quietly fades out of focus. He doesn't have to kill an investigation to end it. He can just stop feeding it. And it sounds like this is exactly what Blanche plans to do. The problem is that DOJ already identified 6 million pages of material.
The department's collection effort resulted in more than 6 million pages being identified as potentially responsive, including department and FBI emails, interview summaries, images, videos, and various other materials collected and generated during the various investigations and prosecutions that the act covered.
But only about 3.5 million pages were released. That's not a rounding error. That's roughly half. And critics, including lawmakers, have already said that key documents may still be withheld and that subpoenas may not have been fully complied with. So when Blanche says, we're done, that's not a fact. That's just a position. And he doesn't get the last word on the subject. Congress can still issue subpoenas and force document production. If Blanche fails to comply, DOJ officials can be held in contempt. The courts can also order releases. And if the Epstein Files Transparency Act isn't fully satisfied, the DOJ can still be challenged. And this is where we come in. We need to stay laser focused on what Congress and the courts do next. If Blanche tries to sidestep the Epstein Files, they have the power to push back. If they don't, it'll be up to us to call them out and demand they do their jobs. So to recap, the person who became politically toxic over Epstein, removed. The person replacing her, already signaling closure. Todd Blanche isn't stepping in to investigate the Epstein Files. He's stepping in to close the files. Firing Pam Bondi was a win for her, Trump, and Blanche, but not for us. Whether intentional or not, Trump killed 3 birds with 1 stone, appeasing a powerful ally/potential adversary, diffusing public outrage, and shutting down the Epstein Files investigations for good. Or maybe not. We'll see. Regardless, this wasn't a clean break. It was a controlled transition. And the people who failed us, they don't disappear. They move on to higher paying rooms, while accountability quietly disappears. So what does this look like to you guys? Let me know in the comments. If you made it this far, you already know what to do. Thank you so much for your support. See you on the next vid.